Today's presentation is from Jorge Bravo and Elizabeth Thaler. Jorge is a management system expert with more than 20 years of experience. He's an international consultant and university teacher in Latin America. Elizabeth Thaler is a lead assessor for accreditation and certification programs. Elizabeth has worked as a management systems consultant, auditor, and instructor for more than 25 years. Take it away, Jorge and Elizabeth.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our presentation. My name is Jorge Bravo, and together with Elizabeth Thaler, we have prepared the presentation How to Audit Management System for Food Safety ISO 22000-2018 using the new ISO 19011-2018. During the presentation, we will alternate comment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Thaler, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. In this presentation, we will have three main topics. The first one is analysis of the fundamental aspects of the new ISO 22000-2018. What's new and what's expected benefits from those changes. The second topic is analysis of the fundamental aspects of the new ISO 19011 version 2018, and also what is new and what are the expected benefits. And then finally, we'll talk about how to obtain the most benefit out of your food safety management system based on that new version of ISO 22000 through effective auditing using the guidance provided in ISO 19011. We added another slide with frequently asked questions, which we expect or we hope that they're helpful to all or some of you at least. And well, now let's begin. To begin, we will make a brief introduction to explain why it was necessary to generate an updated version of the ISO 22000 standard published in June 2018. And the title of that standard is Food Safety Management Systems Requirements for Any Organization in the Food Chain.
Why it was necessary to update to ISO 22000? There list the three fundamental aspects that were used as input to generate the new ISO 22000 version 2018. Number one, globalization. With over 200 diseases spread through the food chain, it's clear that safe, sustainable food production is one of our greatest challenges. Globalization of the food trade further complicates food safety and the new edition of ISO 22000 on food safety management system present a timely response. Food safety is about the prevention, elimination, and control of foodborne hazard from the site of production to the point of consumption. Since food safety hazards may be introduced at any stage of the process, every company in the food supply chain must exercise adequate hazard control. In fact, food safety can only be maintained through the combined efforts of all parties: government, producer, retailers, and consumers. Number two, transparent food safety. It will also help address the growing need to ensure we can trust current food safety system and the sustainable. Number three, new understanding of the concept of the risk. ISO 22000 also provides a new understanding of the concept of risk, distinguishing between risks at the operational level and the strategic level of a management system. The new standard contains some elements that we must remember.
So there are very marked elements in the current standards for management systems that apply also to ISO 22000:2018. And these are the adoption of a food safety management system is a strategic decision for an organization that can help to improve its overall performance in food safety. Another consideration that applies to all management or all new management system standards is the following verbs that are being used, where shall indicates a requirement. And that is important for implementation. Whenever you see a shall, you know it's mandatory. There's no way around it. And this is also important for auditors because that's mostly what you will be looking at. Should indicates a recommendation, may indicates a permission, and can indicates a possibility or a capability. You will also find in this version more notes, and as you all might know from previous standards, notes provide guidance in understanding or clarifying the requirements in the standard. The food safety management principles are explained in the introduction of the standard.
The food safety management principles. ISO 22000 specified the requirement for FSMS that combine the following generally recognized key elements: interactive communication, system management, prerequisite programs, hazard analysis and critical control point principles. In addition, this document is based on the principles that are common to ISO management system standard. The management principles are customer focus, leadership, engagement of people, process approach, improvement, evidence-based decision-making, relationship management. It is also important to highlight the scope of application of this standard. Scope of ISO 22000:2018. It is aimed to all organizations in the food and feed industries, regardless of size or sector. All requirements of this standard are generic and are intended to be applicable to all organizations in the food chain, regardless of size and complexity from animal food producers, harvesters of wild plants and animals, to catering services. It also applies supplier or equipment, cleaning and disinfectants, packaging materials, and other food contact materials. The new standard ISO 22000 cancels and replaces ISO 22000:2005. Therefore, organizations certified in the 2005 version must make the transition to the new standard. With the aim of achieving greater ease in the integration of management system, the new ISO 22000:2018 standard has taken to HLS structure.
Yeah, talking about the HLS structure, that's the high-level structure of the ISO directives. That's the chapter distribution with 10 clauses that is being introduced to all new ISO management system standards, where clauses 4 through 10 are requirements. In an organization, different management systems can coexist, and almost always working with these systems separately represents a high administrative cost, time, and most likely a waste of resources. The high-level structure facilitates the integration of those management systems. For example, ISO 22000 can be very well integrated with ISO 27001 or 9001, 14001, etc., etc. The new norm correlates in a more exact way three concepts known by implementers and by auditors and users, and by the organizations of the food chain. It's the three concepts are the process approach, the PDCA cycle, and risk-based thinking. So here we have an interesting diagram. Let's talk about the PDCA cycle. Most of you are most likely familiar with this. It's the plan, do, check, act cycle. ISO 22000-2018 explains the PDCA cycle at the two levels. And this is really important, and this is probably new to some of you. One level is the organizational planning and control, and the other level is operational planning and control for food safety. So let's talk about the first one, which is the bigger cycle, organizational planning and control. The first quarter would be P for plan. That refers to establish the objectives of the system and its processes, provide the resources needed to deliver the results, and identify and address the risks and opportunities. And all these requirements are expressed in clauses 4, 5, 6, and 7 of ISO 22000. Now moving to the right, the D for do refers to implementing what was planned. And those requirements are expressed in clause 8 of the standard. And this is actually where the second level, which is the smaller cycle here in our diagram, comes into place, and we'll talk about that later. The C for check refers to monitoring and, where relevant, measuring processes and the resulting products and services, analyze and evaluate information and data from monitoring, measuring, and verification activities, and report the results. And this is expressed in chapter 9 of the standard. And again, this applies to all high-level structure management system standards. Now, finally, the A refers to taking actions to improve the performance of the management system as necessary. And the respective requirements are stated in clause 10 of the standard. Now let's move to the smaller cycle, operational planning and control for food safety. This cycle represents the deployment of the do of the first level, the organizational planning and control, clause 8 of the standard. It refers fundamentally to aspects related to food safety. And I believe most of you who have worked with ISO 22000 before are familiar with that. In the cycle, you will also find the P for plan. It means, or it refers to the elaboration of the PRPs, traceability systems, emergency preparedness and responses, hazard analysis, validation of control measures, hazard control plan, HACCP and OPRP plan, and verification planning. The do refers to the implementation of the plan for food safety, control, monitoring and measuring, control of product and process nonconformities for food safety. Check refers to verification activities and analysis of results of verification activities, and act refers to updating the preliminary information document specifying the PRPs and the hazard control plan as a result of the of everything else. So these are continuous cycles that are aimed at continually improving your food safety management system at both levels. Now that output from the operational level feeds directly into the PDCA cycle of the organizational level. And remember, at the organizational planning and control level, that's where the organization is supposed to take strategic decisions. The organization establishes objectives, processes, identifies risks and opportunities, and defines the desired outputs of the management system. And we have an example here. If you look at the cow, the operational planning and control represents one spot of the cow, where the organizational level represents the complete cow. And if you look at events where food safety has been compromised, and you can do that by looking up recalls or food safety incidents, you can go to the FDA website, etc. In many cases, you will find that the organization did everything as planned. However, they failed to analyze the data to determine trends, which would have allowed them to prevent food safety incidents from happening. And that's why this new standard is much stricter when it comes to organizational planning and control, and there are more requirements in place to ensure that this is actually being done. Now, it is appropriate to make a summary of what is new in ISO 22000. As we said earlier, the standard adopted the HLS, the high-level structure for ISO management system standards, which means that there are a few new requirements to be taken into consideration. One of these requirements is the context of the organization. The organization needs to take into account the external and internal issues, as well as the needs and expectations of relevant interested parties, as outlined in Clause 4. Now, what does that mean for an FSMS? Working with a food safety management system, starting with a context analysis, allows the organization to obtain more accurate approximation of the external and internal factors that may affect the safety and the risks associated with the system. For example, because I know these are big words, it's always easier to look at specific examples. And here's one: the variation of the currency exchange rate. For example, the US dollar versus the Chinese currency, the yen, I think. Senior management may take economic decisions tending to savings that can generate risks for their food safety management system. So therefore, they have to take into consideration all the related factors and not just the economic factor. On the other hand, an important internal issue in the food industry, for example, would be the lack of control in the rotation of personnel. It's very common to find high rotation in personnel, especially when it comes to temporary workers or seasonal workers. And how does the organization control that? So these are things that need to be considered at the strategic level of the organization. Number 2 are the risks and opportunities. A new approach to risk, and risk has of course always been a vital concept in the food business. However, in the revised ISO 22000, there's a distinction between the risk at the operational level and at the business level of the management system. Risk-based thinking is a new principle and has to be applied to the entire organization at both the organizational and the operational level. This has not taken away anything from the HACCP plan and all other risk-related activities that have been there before. It's just an add-on. Number 3, the Codex Alimentarius. There are now strong links to the Codex, which is a United Nations food group that develops food safety guidelines for governments. And number 4, and again, these are the major changes that we have identified. Number 4 is greater emphasis on the top management's role, which includes leadership and commitment with respect to the food safety management system. For example, through the food policy and the objectives, through the integration of the food safety management system requirements into the organization's business processes, through directing and supporting persons to contribute more effectively to the food safety management system, and by promoting continual improvement. Now, number 5, in number 5 we'll talk about communications and objectives. And are PRPs and HACCPs in ISO 22000 2018?
High-level structure adoption. Number 5, communication management system, PRPs, HACCP. The new standard offers a dynamic control of food safety hazard combining the following generally recognized key elements: interactive communication, systems management, prerequisite programs, and the principles hazard. Now it's necessary to determine what, when, and how to communicate. Number 6, objective of food safety management system. There is greater emphasis on objective as driver of improvement. And number 7, documented information shall be controlled to ensure to it adequately protected. The explicit requirement to have document procedures has been removed. Examples of document information are FSMS policy and objective. It is also important to comment on some concepts that have been updated and new concepts that have been incorporated in the 2018 version.
So we are looking here at a list of terms and definitions, and I'm not going to go through that list. I just want to point out that there are a few new terms and definitions, and some are slightly modified. For example, the first one, food safety. In the 2005 version, the definition for food safety was a concept that food will not cause harm to the consumer when it is prepared and or eaten according to its intended use. Now, this has undergone a significant change. Now, the definition for food safety is assurance that food will not cause an adverse health effect for the consumer when it is prepared and or consumed in accordance with its intended use. So instead of harm, we're talking about health effect, and they also incorporated the term assurance. Other changes, for example, number 8, animal food, that was not previously included in the 2005 version. It is now included, and it's included within the scope of this document, of the standard. And number 10, risk, that was also not included. Risk is the effect of uncertainty. That's a definition out of ISO 31000 for risk management. And due to the current complexity of the industrial sectors in the food chain, ISO 22000-2018 emphasizes in the control of outsourced processes or externally contracted processes.
Outsourced processes are controlled. Food safety is related to the presence of food safety hazard at the time of consumption by the consumer. Food safety hazard can occur at any stage of the food chain. Food safety is ensured through the combined effort of all the parties in the food chain. In the 2005 version, the control of the external processes is mentioned, but in this new version, much emphasis is given to this aspect. Number 1, an improved FSMS. ISO 22000 enables organizations to put in place a full safety management system that help them improve their overall performance when it comes to food safety. Number two, management of risk. Improvement management of risk in food safety process. Number three, strong links to the United Nations Codex Alimentarius. ISO 22000 is based on the Codex principle for food hygiene, and this enables authorities to refer to ISO 22000 in national requirement and government inspection to ensure to all the criteria for food safety are met. Now, let's talk about the new ISO 19011 version 2018.
All right. Since the previous version of ISO 19011 2011, a lot has happened, a lot has changed. When that previous version was published, there were 11 ISO management system standards. Now there are approximately 44 and 20 are being revised. That number may have changed by now because we're in 2019, right? I got this data from 2018. And there's still a few more in development. User needs and expectations have also changed, and so has the global context for doing business. Now, with the introduction of the ISO directive's high-level structure, all new and revised management system standards follow the same structure. Hence, there was a need for an update to ISO 19011, and that need became apparent. The considerations for that review to ISO 19011 were an increased integration of multiple management system standards. Many organizations choose to have a management system that conforms to several standards, for example, quality and food safety management. Another consideration was the global business environment, which has significantly changed during the last decade or two. Much information is now stored electronically, and the definition of location is not always clear. Number three, organizations can be as simple as a one-man out-of-the-garage operation or as complex as a large organization with multiple sites. ISO 19011 must provide guidance which is generic enough to address all types of businesses and management systems, and at the same time provide sufficient guidance to be useful. And finally, there was also a need to include risk considerations. That is not just risk related to the audit itself, for example, not reaching the audit objectives, but also how to audit risk, since all management system standards as per HLS, high-level structure, require risk-based thinking. Now, talking about what is new with ISO 19011 2018, and this is just a brief overview. We're really not going into detail with this. One is the risk-based approach, which is an audit approach that considers risks and opportunities, meaning that the auditor also needs to look at how the organization handles or treats risks. And that's the risk-based thinking. And in the case of food safety management system, also the Section 8 of the standard and how they control risk related to food safety. Number two, audit priority should be given to allocating resources and methods to matters in a management system with higher inherent risk and lower level of performance. Number three, with the addition of the context of the organization and expectations and needs of interested parties, as we said before, the audit program objectives should be consistent with the strategic direction of the audit client. And number four, auditors must be competent to perform the audit. And this also includes knowledge of the business and the involved risks and opportunities. So if you're an auditor, you cannot just wink it and go in there into any organization and just start auditing. You do have to be prepared. You have to know about the business so that you can really effectively audit the management system. Additional guidance for auditors who plan and perform audits also can be seen on the next slide.
Here is the list of the annexes. The ones in the red are new. For example, process approach to auditing. Another example is a performance results. Auditing compliance within a management system. Auditing context. Auditing leadership and commitment. It's a very important point. Auditing risk and opportunities. For example, auditing of supply chain and auditing virtual activities and location.
Now let's look at how these changes and additions to ISO 19011 affect all those involved in audits. Let's start with the audit client. And please remember that the audit client and the audit, if you do a supplier audit, then your audit client is the organization who tells you or who sends you to actually audit the supplier. The supplier will be the auditee. The organization that tells you to do the audit or that hires you to do the audit is the audit client. Well, the audit client should be the one benefiting the most after all these changes have been implemented. If done well, the audit output should provide valuable information on the auditee's management system and findings that are relevant to the audit client's strategic direction and support the management system policy and objectives, while taking into consideration its risks and its opportunities. So the most important part is relevant findings. Changes for the auditee. Expect an audit report that provides valuable information on your management system, its gaps and opportunities, based on your business needs and expectations, and if the management system is achieving its objectives. Expect the audit programs and individual audits to become more efficient and with focus on matters that are significant. How to obtain the most benefit out of your food safety management system based on ISO 22018 through effective auditing using ISO 19011. Having talked about these two standards, now let's look how we can combine them and get the most benefits.
New emphasis for auditing a new FSMS.
Yeah, here we have summarized in this table the most important points of both new standards and how they interact. And just so you can follow as we go through the table, in the left column, you see the ISO 19011 guidance. In the right column, you see how to apply it to auditing your food safety management system.
Okay, number one. Consider complexity, context, and risks of the client in the standard of the audit. With the correlation with the context, the internal and external issues, interested party, and scope in the new food safety management system. Number two, use risk-based approach to achieve program, plan, and client objective. And the other standard is risk and other opportunities. Number three, the objective of the audit program coherent with the client. In the client strategic direction, policy, and objective commitment document information.
And number 4, focus on the expected results of the management system. That means that you have to review the overall performance of the management system and if it meets the organization's objectives. Number 5, audit compliance. This is important in a heavily regulated and highly risky environment such as the food industry. During the audit, you need to make sure that the organization is aware of all the legal and regulatory requirements applicable and that they have adequate processes in place to ensure compliance with the respected and also the necessary documented evidence to be able to show that they actually meet all the requirements. Number 6, the use of the process approach. Verify if the processes are adequate, if they're effective, and if the intended outcome is reached. That's the main objective of the process approach. Now, in order to do that and to really add value to an audit, auditors must be knowledgeable of both standards, ISO 22000 and ISO 19011, and they also must be knowledgeable of the applicable legal and regulatory requirements, as well as the products and processes and services specific to the organization they're auditing. Auditors also need the right attitude and demonstrate appropriate personal behavior in order to be successful in the audit. If an auditor comes in as like a policeman, then he or she will have a hard time getting the information from the auditee. If the attitude is right, then it's much easier on both parties. And at the end, the objective is to get sufficient information and to use that output from internal audits as a crucial element for management to understand the status of the management system and also to continually improve it, and for the improvement of the audit program.
This graphic support to what we just said. The internal audit is part of management system and support the improvement of food safety management system. The audit objective must be aligned to a strategic direction of the organization. Auditors must be competent in verifying if the management system meets in its objective and have sufficient specific knowledge to detect any gaps that could lead to unsafe conditions within the supply chain or that part that is under its control and responsibility.
Now this diagram is copied right out of the ISO 22000-2018 standard. Here we look once again at the 2 levels of the process approach as required by ISO 22000-2018. This may not be new to some of you, but others may have a hard time understanding. Even though the process approach has been around for some time, there are still auditors who seem to confuse an audit with an inspection. When you look at this diagram, level 1 covers the overall frame of the food safety management system. Sections or clauses 4 through 7 and 9 and 10. And level 2 covers the operational planning and control. It covers the operational processes within the food safety management system, which is clause 8 of the standard. Communication between these 2 levels is therefore essential. Risk-based thinking is addressed on both levels, organizational and operational, and this is consistent with the process approach. Risk management at the organizational level is addressed in clause 6.1, and at the operational level, it's mostly addressed through the hazard analysis and following activities. The concept of risk-based thinking based on the hazard principles at the operational level is implicit in ISO 22000. Now remember, a food safety management system audit is much more than an inspection. In an inspection, you basically verify if all planned activities are actually being done. In a management system audit, you verify that the organization is doing what has been planned, but also if the plan is adequate and if the system overall is effective in reaching its intended results. That means that sometimes it's best to start from the back to the front. When you go after an audit trail, you look what's the expected result, and then you see if they do everything that is needed to reach that result, or what are they not doing so that that causes them not to be effective in reaching those results. You may also consider that indicators do not always measure what they're supposed to measure. So when you do an audit, look at those indicators. What do they actually mean? Ask management, what are you measuring with this? How are you measuring it? And you can really dig deep into that. Indicators in many cases are being used as a way to demonstrate that something is being done to fulfill a requirement, like, oh, here, I have an indicator, even though it does not really add any value to the management system or to the organization. And sometimes indicators are established for goals that can never be met, so that doesn't really make much sense either, right? And in many cases, there are too many indicators that just add a burden to the organization and are not really useful, or may not be useful, or may not be used correctly. So again, if you look up some of the food incidents and their causes, you will find that many of these incidents could have been avoided if someone had looked at the big picture of their management system. Now we're moving to conclusions. With the combination of these two standards, the following can be expected. A food safety management system that takes into consideration the context of the organization and its related risks and opportunities. A process approach that covers two levels: the overall frame of the food safety management system and the operational processes within the food safety management system. Risk-based thinking at both levels, and audit programs and individual audits to be more effective and efficient by focusing on matters that represent a higher risk or a lower level of performance. And there's another one which is not written here, but it's important to say, what the overall purpose of a food safety management system, I guess we're all clear on that, is really to ensure that the food safety hazards are being appropriately controlled, and that the food that reaches the plate of the consumer is safe to consume. Therefore, a food safety management system based on ISO 22018 seeks to manage the risks, to avoid food safety problems, and to identify opportunities for improvement of the organization's performance, and thus achieve the objectives established in the strategic direction of the organization.
Frequent questions. How can I evaluate the risks in food safety management system? It is recommended to use ISO 31000 2018 Risk Management Guidelines and ISO 31010 2009 Risk Management Techniques.
Typical question number 2. My organization already has a food safety management system based on ISO 22005 in place. What they need to do to achieve conformity to ISO 22018. Well, the response is very simple. Perform a gap analysis. You will most likely find that many of the requirements have not changed. There are some additional requirements. Determine what requirements are new and implement actions to address those.
Number 3, is there any additional guidance available that will help me understand the requirement of ISO 22000 2018? Yes, there's several technical standards such as ISO TS 22002, ISO TS 22003, and ISO 22005, etc. See also online browsing platform in the ISO webpage.
Yeah, and there's also more information available if you go directly to the ISO Technical Committee 34, who is in charge of the standards. And so there's the ISO TC 34 Food Product Subcommittee SC 17 Management Systems for Food Safety. And there is the TC 34 853 published ISO standards and 138 ISO standards under development. We are currently working on a book on good practices for auditing management systems, the holistic audit. ISO 19011 is a great guidance document, and if you have ever taken an auditing class, I'm sure you have learned a lot. However, in practice, everything looks different. And with decades of experience auditing different types of management systems and our passion for the trade, we have decided to write this book, which is intended to provide very practical guidance to auditors on issues they might find difficult. Please look for the book as of October 2019. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.